Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the first WIF Talk of the season 2017-2018. Please, the ladies in the back, take your seat. This year we have exciting news to share with you. First, the spouse of the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has accepted to be our patron, and for that we are very grateful. Secondly, I also want to use this opportunity to congratulate our former president, Sahar Basiri, for being appointed as Lebanon's new UNESCO ambassador. We wish her all the best in this new position. Today, our guest speaker, Paloma Duran, Director of the Sustainable Development Goals Fund, will be talking about the second year anniversary of the Agenda 2030, lessons learned from the Sustainable Development Goal Funds. This event is in the collaboration with the Permanent Mission of Peru. For that, we are very thankful. Also, I'd like to extend the best regards from Sonia Mesa Cuadra, spouse of the Ambassador of Peru. She wanted to be here, but she's in a business trip, but she sends her regards. Now, I want to give the floor to my colleague, Faika Saki from Egypt. She will be introducing our speaker. Faika, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sophia. Can you hear me? No? Oh. Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah, that's better. Thank you, Sophia. Welcome, Dr. Paloma, our distinguished speaker. Our distinguished speaker, Dr. Paloma Duran, is a native of Spain. She is the director of the Sustainable Development Goals Fund, a UN mechanism that brings together UN agencies, national governments, academia, civil society, and business to achieve SDGs throughout the world. In her capacity as director of the SDG Fund, she oversaw the launching of a private sector advisory group consisting of global companies from various sectors with the purpose of providing guidance and strategic support to achieve better development results in coordination with the private sector. Dr. Duran has an extensive professional experience in development, government, and UN issues. She has been the United Nations Vice Chair of the UN Commission of Social Development during her time as Counselor of Human Rights in the Permanent Mission of Spain to the United Nations. Prior to that, she worked as Chef de Cabinet for the Social Affairs Secretariat and as Vice President of the Women's Institute of Spain. She has served on the EU's Equality Committee and the Council of Europe's expert group on affirmative action. She has also worked with civil society in countries such as Nigeria, Guatemala, Peru, and the Philippines. She holds a master's degree and PhD in law as well as in political science. So far, her extensive work through the SDG Fund has impacted and improved the lives of over 1 million people all over the world. Thank you, Dr. Paloma. You have the floor.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to the organizers of this meeting, or maybe we can say of this get-together, just to give me the opportunity to discuss and to talk a little bit about the SDGs. Especially thank you to Sophia and Sonia, and also the Vice President for organizing this. And I think that, for me, it's really a privilege to have the opportunity to talk here, especially taking into account that the majority of the audience are women. And I spent some part of my life working on gender issues and promoting equality between women and men. So thank you so much for the invitation. And before to start with the explanation that I prepared in order to see what's going on with the agenda, I would like just to put a very brief video about the fund where I'm working.
To achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, we need solutions We are going to need a lot of innovation, and we certainly need genuine partnerships. The goals are all different. Together, they're bold and they're transformative blueprint for a world of peace and prosperity where no one is left behind. These are the essential ingredients for peaceful, just, and inclusive societies, and we need to work together in a global partnership for a better future.
The goal is to improve the life of every human being, especially in developing countries. And in order to achieve this goal, we need to work together. In order to work together, we need really to review and to check the ways that we traditionally use and change wherever we need to change in order to keep in mind the real goal, which is really eradicate poverty all over the world and at the same time trying to take care of every human being.
We strongly believe that the cooperation between the public and the private sector is key in advancing in the goals that the international community has set for 2030.
Esto es todo lo que está en mi huerto, que gracias a Dios y al conjunto sano pues me beneficia en lo que es a mi familia y a los vecinos también que quieren comer algo fresco, algo sano, algo natural.
Okay, so you know, I don't used to talk, stand here, so I feel a little bit in a different setting that I usually use. Let's see if I'm able really to talk in this like formal setting. But anyway, I prepared just a very brief presentation trying to explain to you, first of all, the situation with the SDGs, how was the change between the MDGs to the SDGs, and what's the role of the different actors in order to really improve the life of many people. And then on this basis, I would like just to explain a little bit the work that we are doing through the SDG Fund, which is one of the mechanisms that the UN now has in order to implement the new agenda. So I'm sure that you are aware about the Millennium Development Goals, but I think one of the things that I would like just to explain very, very brief is, if you remember, I'm sure that you are also familiar with all the process with the MDGs. The agenda for the MDGs was an agenda just focused on developing countries. It was just thinking in poor countries that need some support. And then at the same time, it was an agenda just very focused on the governmental side, even if, of course, the civil society was present there, but it was just focused on the role of the governments and the governmental institutions in order to implement the agenda. And at the same time, it was also an agreement among member states without the participation of other actors. So these three things that, I mean, it happens, the situation, the international setting was completely different in 2000 and in 2015, but there are many lessons learned that we got from the previous negotiation for the MDGs in order to improve the new agenda that was approved in September. So as you know, 2015, that was the time when the new agenda was approved. It was the time where we have three important events, if I can say events, much better to say three important milestones in the history of the UN, which was the Conference for Financing for Development, also the approval of the 2030 Agenda, and also the conference on parties related to climate change. So with this, I think that it's important just to talk about the SDGs under this framework, because when we talk about the SDGs, we are talking about sustainable development goals, keeping in mind that the sustainability is not only an environmental issue, but the idea of the sustainability in the agenda is just to cover the social, the economic, and the environmental side of sustainability. And that's the reason, because I think it's important to put the negotiation of the new agenda under this big framework, meaning that I think that the idea was during the process of the negotiation of the agenda just to keep in mind all the actors, trying to engage all the stakeholders, especially keeping in mind one thing, and is that really the problem of poverty is a problem that we have to solve all together, meaning that all the actors in the society, and not only the governments, are responsible for that. This is one thing, and then the other thing that I think is important in the new agenda is that poverty is a problem not only for developing countries. There are many middle-income countries which have really a very important improvement in the economic side, but still they have a lot of inequalities. And then at the same time, it's easy to find some rich countries where you can find important gaps related to poverty, and many people that even in the best economical situation are living in poverty. So the idea of the agenda is to have a universal agenda, not only for developing countries, but for all the countries in the UN, because it's a responsibility for all the societies, all the actors in the societies, but also for all the societies, not only for the traditional donors and the traditional beneficiaries. So the idea is really to change a little bit the approach with only one goal, which is really eradicate poverty, or at least try to improve the life of the people that are living in need. So I think that this is a very important thing. Then we can discuss many logistical things, many political issues, many, controversial issues related to the UN system, to the governments, to the civil society or wherever. But the real fact is that the main goal for the new agenda is to improve the life of the people. So that's the reason, because this is one of the pictures of our program from the Philippines, where we are working, trying to facilitate the access to water to some rural areas that really have a lot of problems with that. So in the presentation, the majority of the pictures are coming from our programs, which I'm really very proud to, not only for the pictures, but just because the results. Because we know that with the programs that we started in 2015, we have, as it was mentioned here, more than 1 million of direct beneficiaries, but more than 3.5 million beneficiaries as a whole, which is nothing compared with the needs, but at least is something. So this idea of the sustainable development, as I mentioned, is just articulated in these three pillars: the environmental side, the social development side, and the economic development side. So I think that it's important also to understand, and I'm sure that you are aware about that, that in 2000, the situation was one in the international arena, and in 2015, the situation was completely different in the sense, I'm not talking only about the effects of September 11, but I'm talking also about the economic changes in the international setting, where in 2000 there are some countries that never support programs for development, and now they have specific agencies and specific policies working for development. In 2000, there was no official list of middle-income countries. The official distribution of the countries were developing and developed countries, and in 2015 it was an official list of middle-income countries, which include countries that they have a lot of improvement from the political, from the economic point of view, but at the same time still they have a lot of problems, especially focused on inequalities among different sectors in the society. And I think that, excuse me, there are also some themes that were not included in the agenda in 2000 and are included in the agenda in 2015. For instance, not only the references to environment, that in 2000 even if in the UN we already have some debates and some meetings related to environment, but it was not like a priority in the agenda for member states to work on that. And in 2015, it was a priority. There are many social issues that were not in the agenda in 2000. For instance, I'm thinking in the agenda in the summit for aging, that it was organized in 2001, but in 2000 was not in the agenda. And in 2015 is very clear that we need policies not only for children and women, which is, I mean, excuse me to say that, but it is the traditional approach to social issues. But there are also, I mean, we need to do something with youth. We need to do something with aging, not as a passive part of the society, on the contrary, as a very active active contribution to the society from all people. So, you know, there are many changes in 2015. And I think that the new agenda, I'm not saying that this is the ideal agenda, in the sense that, as you know, there are many criticisms related to the number of indicators and the number of goals and many other things. But the real thing is that we have to be, if I may say so, to be a little bit pragmatic, in the sense that the important thing, I repeat, is the people living in poverty. So we need to do something. In the meantime, we can improve many things, but we need really to act. But I think that the new agenda try really to integrate many of these issues. This is a very, I'm sorry because it's not very clear in the slide, but if you see in the lower part, this is like, if I can say so, is like the areas covered by the MDGs. And in the upper side, you have the areas covered by the SDGs, which are much more. You know, the typical question that I receive many times, and I'm sure that you also hear that, is why the new agenda has really 17 goals and this amount of indicators. This is impossible, it's to complicate the life. But on the contrary, the idea is not just to complicate the life of anyone. The idea is try to give a reply and an answer to the real problems that we have now in the society and that probably we didn't realize in 2000. So I think that it's important just to have this in mind as a framework for the whole thing on SDGs. So in this setting, the agenda was approved in September 2015, and the fund was created some months before the approval of the agenda, taking into account that the idea is try to have a mechanism that really can help and promote this new agenda for development with this specific goal, which is really eradicate poverty for all over the world. So with this in mind, the fund was created initially, I mean, if I might say so, there are like two pillars in the fund. One is the implementation of specific programs in the field in the traditional developing countries where we need to work. I mean, the idea to have a universal agenda doesn't mean that now we are working only, I mean, in two sides, because the reality is that in developing countries we have the main problems with the people, or at least they have less access to many things than in developed countries. But even though the idea of the fund is just to work in two tracks. In one is the implementation of programs in the field in developing countries, changing a little bit the methodology that traditionally we use in the house in order really to implement development policies. When I say to change a little bit is, as probably many of you know, in 2005, it was approved the Paris Declaration. The Paris Declaration that then after that it has the Bhutan Declaration and Accra Declaration, many other documents, trying really to reinforce the idea of the national ownership. So in the fund we are trying to change a little bit this idea. I mean, I hope that we are in an informal meeting, right? I mean, a patronizing idea of development where I, as a donor, I'm going to give you the money and I'm going to explain to you where do you have to use this money, and I'm going to give to you the tools in order to do the things in the way that I want to. So But we would like really to put aside this idea and try to ensure the national ownerships. What are the needs of every country? What are the tools that they have? How can we work with the local governments and with the local people in order to achieve the local needs? So in order to do so, which is very easy to say and sometimes complicated to implement, we introduce in all our programs 2 requirements. First, matching funds. If I give you $1, you have to find an additional one from the local network. It doesn't matter if this additional donor, if this additional dollar is coming from the government, from civil society, from private sector, or even from international organizations working in the field. But the thing is that we would like with this to create a kind of a local network that ensure the sustainability of the programs. For instance, I remember one of the programs that when we started the process of the negotiation, the Minister of Agriculture never ever worked with the Minister of Environment and Minister for Women, ever in the past. So in order to prepare the program, for the first time, they tried to co-design one program together. Meaning that with this, we are really promoting the creation of local networks that really are going to ensure the sustainability of all the programs. And then at the same time, with the matching funds, we multiply by more than 2 the initial budget that we have in the fund for the programs with local money. So it's not, it's the idea, as I mentioned, is just try to ensure the national ownership. And then at the same time, with the matching funds, the second requirement was to create a national steering committee where all the stakeholders that are contributing to the program have to make the daily decisions about the implementation of the program. So here from New York, which is a wonderful city, we are not going to explain to the country what they have to do, but just the stakeholders and the partners in the field are going to implement the daily decisions, even if, of course, we are trying to monitor and follow up what's going on with the activity plan, with the budget, with the work that they are doing, but keeping in mind that, for us, the priority is the needs of the country. So in order to do so, which is just to change a little bit here in the house, many of the things, we introduce a part of the matching funds, we introduce also not new, but new in practice, let's say, not new in theory, one way to work, which is try to put all the UN agencies together. Not to complicate the life of anyone, but on the contrary, trying to get the expertise of all the agencies of the UN working together. For instance, if we have a program on access to food for kids in Nigeria, we need to have FAO, which is the agency working usually with food issues, but we need UNICEF, which is usually working with kids. And also probably if we are going to talk about food security and improve the commercialization of the products, we need also to have their ILO, for instance, or ITC, the International Trade Center. So one of the requirements of our projects is that at least 3 agencies of the UN are going to work together under the leadership of the resident coordinator that, as you know, is like our ambassador in the field. So really, everything, we don't impose from here what are the agencies that have to work together. This is the decision of the resident coordinator that at the national level really knows who are the perfect agencies to work in the project and who are the perfect agencies just to implement the project. So this is like the pillar for the joint programs where we introduce this idea, the multidimensionality of the programs, because one of the things that we discover now that we are receiving the first evaluation reports is that even if we focus the program on food security, the impact is in the rest of the goals. Because when you improve the access to food, you are also improving the access to the schools, With the access to the schools, you can improve the access to health. With the access to health, you can improve also the job situation in the country. So what happened is that, at least for the time being, with the first reports that we already received from 7 of the programs, is confirmed that working in one of the areas you can impact and you can really improve the situation in many other areas. And I think that this is a very positive experience. So this is like the pillar related to the joint program. So with that, we are already working now in 23 countries. We are working with 14 agencies of the UN. I repeat, in every case, under the leadership of the resident coordinator. And I think that now we are implementing $75 million, which is nothing compared with the trillions of dollars that we need for the agenda, but at least it's like to say, you know, here is the seed in order to improve the situation. So this is one of the blocks where we are working. And then at the same time, the new agenda brings a lot of opportunities in order to engage actors that traditionally didn't work with the UN, even if they are working on development. For instance, I'm thinking, of course, civil society, but academia, private sector, creative industries, and so on. So we decided to have like the second block where we are working is just in the side of, is beyond advocacy, because the idea is try to engage these actors in order to see how can we implement the agenda together. So one of the first things that we did, it was to work with the private sector. It's very easy to say we are going to work with the private sector, but I have to confess that sometimes very bit complicated to work with the private sector when the language in the UN and in the private sector and in the local governments is completely different, and even the timing. I mean, the timing for the monitor reports, the timing for the co-design of the joint program. So it's not easy. But we thought, you know, if we would like really to engage the private sector, we need to ask to the private sector how to do that. Because in the UN, at least in our team, we don't have experts working in the private sector that suddenly they decided to work with us. So we decided to create a very small group of private sector companies trying to see how they can co-design with us the projects and co-implement with us the project. So we make a mapping, trying to see which are companies from the 5 regions of the UN, not only from the US, but for the 5 regions of the UN, working in different sectors, working with different sizes, and working in different geographical locations. So we prepare, but at the same time, of course, companies that already have like a social responsibility policy there, or they have a foundation, a strong foundation there. But let's see if it's feasible to change a little bit also this, and how can we work with them in order to integrate the SDGs in the core business of the companies. So we prepare an advisory group. After the mapping, we have 100 companies from all over the world. Doesn't mean that there are many others that probably are not in our list, but we did the map only with these 100. Then we pass the due diligence process, which is not an easy process, to ensure in the UN that they are achieving all the commitments, the human rights charter, and so on. So from 100, we have the list reduced to 42. And from these 42, we try to ensure that we have a representation from all the regions, all the sectors, and all the sizes. So finally, we got an advisory group with 12 companies from all over the world, and we organized with them a meeting. Just to say, listen, we would like to work with the private sector, not only as a donor, but also as an actor. How can we do that? So we prepared a first tool that was published with Harvard University. As you know, Harvard University has a very strong department for social responsibility led by Jane Nelson. So she was with us, And the report is not a traditional UN report in the sense that it's not that the UN explained to the companies what they have to do. Is that we change a little bit and we try to listen the voices of the companies in order to see what they think that they can do with us in order to co-design and co-implement the programs. So it was a very interesting exercise, not easy. It was a challenge, but finally we got this tool. It was launched in November 2015. It was, literally running, trying to have this as soon as possible. And it was a very useful tool, especially because we have there the voices of the companies. And I think that this is a very important tool. And then last year, one of the things that the advisory group proposed is, listen, when we talk about the private sector is not only one thing. In the private sector, you have companies with 1 worker or 1 million workers, and of course the challenges are different. You have companies working on diamonds, and you have companies working on, on water, or, there are many challenges there. So we need to see how to apply this idea of the universality to the private sector. So we did the same exercise. We organized 5 different workshops in the 5 regions of the UN, led by our companies. And it was really very interesting to see the different approach from the private sector. I remember that in Nigeria, when we have the first conversation there, I don't know if we have anybody here from Nigeria, but I remember that the first question was, well, for the workshop, we need to have the government there. And then when we organized the workshop with the US, I remember that the first question was, we don't want anybody from the government. So, fine, but it's a confirmation that, of course, universality means that you have to keep in mind the needs of each sector and each country. So, and of course, it's a completely different approach. So last year, we submit the report on the universality applied to the private sector, how the different sizes of the companies can really deal with this idea to integrate the SDGs into the core business of the companies. And then this year, we are now in the process to finalize with the 3rd report that we are preparing, which is focused on business and peace. So it will be launched the 3rd of November, so you are all invited. I will share with you, Sophia, the invitation, and if you like, you will be more than welcome. And, as a result of that, because we don't want it to have just like a theory, but Teresa, can we talk? I don't know what happened with the computer. I don't need the computer to explain that, but anyway. So as a result of this process with the private sector, we started with the first program in Nigeria, where we are working with the private sector using this idea, co-designing with them and co-implementing with them. So it's called Food Africa. It's a program in Kaduna State, in the border with the territory of Boko Haram. And the idea of the program is just to, you can remove it. Yeah, I don't think we need it. Yeah. It's a pity because I have, or we can try. Okay. So Food Africa project, it is a project where we are trying to improve the life of the local farmers in Kaduna State, where, as you know, 70% of the young people are unemployed in the area, and is the perfect setting really to receive invitation from some terrorist group in order really to get young people, no? So we are creating there a facility with like 2 parts. In the first part, you know that Nigeria is producer #1 of tomato in the world, but they buy usually 60% of the consumption of tomato from outside. So the idea is to try to see how the farmers can really preserve the tomato and commercialize the tomato in order to improve the life of these people. So in the first part of the facility, the farmers are going to receive training in order to preserve the tomato using the local pepper. And the training is going to, we have the first trip now in October, and the Roca brothers, that are very well-known chefs in the world, are going to give this training. And then the farmers are going also to receive a training how to use the cooperatives that they already have it, but they don't have the financial skills in order to use it. So they are going also to receive that. And then in the third part of the facility, they are going to have a kind of a market where they can commercialize the products. So we are going to implement this with a private sector company. Is Sahara Group is the name of the company there, with 3 different agencies of the UN. FAO, of course, is going to be there because it's related to food security, with the International Trade Center, and also with ILO, that is going to give the training for the cooperatives for the people. So it was really very nice because, for instance, this year, during the Davos meeting in February, as you know, usually some agencies of the UN organize a kind of a dinner or lunch or something for prime ministers and for people going there. So this year, World Food Program invited us to ask the Roca brothers, who are goodwill ambassadors in the fund, to prepare something for the dessert. So they prepare a bonbon, which is called now Bonbon Kaduna, with tomato from Kaduna and with chocolate from Peru. So we put both things together, and the idea now is to commercialize the chocolates. It's a very strange mix, but I promise you that the taste was wonderful. And you know, it was also the opportunity to explain to many people the work that we are doing in Kaduna with the tomato and in Peru with the chocolate. So I think that, I mean, it's feasible to do the work with the private sector, but I think that is really a challenge because we need to change many things. But at the same time that we are working with this Food Africa project, that we are now thinking to escalate this and to have also Food India project. We are also preparing Food Latin American project. So the idea is to work really on access to food for many people. But also at the same time that we are working with the private sector, we are also trying to engage other actors. For instance, academia. Academia is also a very complicated actor in the sense that it's very easy to say, let's engage the academia, and everything is solved organizing courses on SDGs, which is fine. I love to have a lot of courses on that, but probably also the academia, the most important thing that the academia has is the knowledge. How can we use the knowledge from very good universities to countries where there is no university and there is no schools for the kids? So let's see how can use this knowledge. So we created a chair for SDGs that we started a year and a half ago. And now we are in the process to start with a very interesting program on digital education. So we created with Pro Futuro, which is a foundation working on this specific area on digital education. And the idea is to facilitate the access to education, especially in rural areas, where it's very easy to train, for instance, the leader of the community or the chef of the community to lead this person or two person in order to use tablets that we prepare and that you can charge with solar energy. So you don't need electricity. And we have already prepared all the tools in the 5 languages of the UN in order to work on that. So the first project will be in Tanzania, and we are now, I think that at the end of this year, we will start with that. And then also we start with creative industries, which is also another area where, I mean, we can do a lot. So we started 2 years ago with the Pritzker Prize. As you know, the Pritzker Prize is like the Nobel Prize for architects. So we signed an agreement with the Hyatt Foundation, which is the foundation dealing with the prize. We have the ceremony here. Because that year the prize was for an architect from Chile. His name is Alejandro Aravena, that he spent the whole career working on social housing. So it was really very moving because the day that we have the event in order to give him the award, we have a conference press here in the UN, and he announced that all the plans that he prepared for all his career are going to be in the webpage in an open space, yes, to be used for any country or for any NGO or for any institution ready to work on social housing. And, you know, I think that this is an important thing, not only because this decision, but also because using the chance that we organize the event here with them, we have a panel with the 10 laureates during the last 10 years, trying to talk how to introduce sustainability in the work of the architects. And, you know, to go beyond the business, which is important, the business, but to go beyond that. It was a very interesting meeting because the approach to sustainability is completely different, and the 10 laureates are coming from completely different countries. So, but at the same time, with that, we are like to open the window to have this kind of dialogue and this conversation with people that really want to do something, and sometimes we don't know how to do it. So we did that with the architects. We started with the Roca Brothers on gastronomy. We are also working now on music. We signed an agreement with Berklee College in Boston, and we have already the first meeting on gender, trying to see how to introduce the agenda, the new agenda for development in the music industry, yes, focusing on programs for women. Because in the majority of the cases, the main artists are women, but the producers and the owners of the companies are men. So, you know, the idea is also to see, well, this is a very specific thing, but it's also part of the agenda. Because as I mentioned, I mean, universality means many things, and the idea is to see how to translate this agenda into specific projects, no? So we started, as I mentioned, gastronomy, architects, music, and, you know, and we continue, I hope. But of course, civil society is in the majority of the implementation of our joint programs. And we started working in 3 areas: in food security and nutrition, access to water and sanitation, and inclusive economic growth. And then we integrated 3 cross-cutting issues: gender, sustainability, and public and private partnerships, which is a very important thing in the projects. And this last year, we started also with a new area on peace and security, and also on education. So I think that, I mean, as soon as we get more resources, we are going to start with more projects. But I think that at least we did an effort to try to integrate all the actors, and especially to try to engage all the actors in order to work together, because I think that the impact is really bigger if we try to put all the synergies. So the last thing that I would like to say is that the idea is not that the governments will be replaced by the private sector, or the private sector by the governments, or the civil society by the creative industries. The idea is to respect the goals for every sector, but try to put all the synergies together in order to improve the life of the people. Because as I mentioned, even if there are many politics, especially in this house, I think that the goal is really to eradicate poverty and, as I mentioned before, to improve the life of the people. And this is what we're trying to do. So I think that, I mean, I'm sorry because what I'm saying is nothing related to the presentation, but we can share with you the presentation, Sophie, if you like. And I mean, if you have any suggestion or idea or, I mean, anything, we are completely open to listen to anyone and to really to continue the work that we already started. So I'm sorry because I take so long, but I'm sorry about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paloma, for telling us about these challenges. A big clap for her. Thank you. Now the microphones are open for remarks or questions. Please, as always, introduce yourself and ask the question or your remark. Please. Okay, Ashley?
Coming, there we are. My name is Ashley Bernhardt, and I'm here from New York, and I'm the deputy chair of the Professional Squash Association, which is the global governing body for the sport. And I was just curious if you have any plans to incorporate sport into your projects.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry because I didn't mention sports, but it's already there. Yeah, we are working very close with the delegation of Monaco, that as you know, they are the leaders on that. We received some contribution from the government of Monaco. And yeah, we are working now with two football clubs to start the training in all the schools that they have all over the world to integrate there in the curricula that they distribute, and also a training on SDGs. But also we are trying to see how to work on that to promote gender balance in the sports. I mean, we are still in the first steps, but yeah, this is the next area where we would like really to start with projects. Because I think that as happened also with architects or with music, or, you know, there are many different actors there and many different ways to approach. Each sport is completely different to the other. And yeah, we are working on that. So if you have any idea, more than happy to talk to you about that. Thank you.
Please, Alejandra, go ahead.
Rivas, I just wanted to know what was the main criteria to choose which programs to implement and where? Because you said you have 17 programs going on, but how do you choose which country and which topic and all of that?
Well, as I mentioned, we use the RC, the resident coordinator. So we usually send a letter of invitation to different countries with a deadline to propose the projects. And then we have, when we receive these proposals, we have independent experts committee, depending on the area, just reviewing that. And then we have a steering committee with all the donors and the agencies of the UN that make the final decision about that. But we usually distribute an invitation depending on the resources that we have at every time.
You, go ahead.
My name is Pablo. I'm Sustainable Development Officer at the World Federation of UN Associations. It's a civil society organization. So I was wondering if you can explain a little bit further, how do you work directly with civil society organizations, maybe in the implementation process, and maybe also particularly international civil society organizations? Thank you.
Thank you, Pablo. Well, with the civil society, we normally, as I mentioned, we are trying just to reinforce the national ownership. So normally, all the work that we are doing with civil society is at the local level. So normally is the RC, the resident coordinator, that usually invites some NGO in order to help with the implementation of the program in the field. We do some activities here, not only focus on civil society, but also in other actors that are part of the third sector, if you like, or of the non-governmental side, in order to work on that, especially for advocacy reasons. We have a calendar that we can share with you, if you like, with all the events that we have during the year, in order really to explain the fund and the work that we are doing, and also to see how to engage more. But on the implementation is always with civil society at the local level.
In the back, please go ahead.
My name is Marie Samuel. I represent an indigenous NGO based in Cusco, Peru, and in New York City. I'm French, not indigenous myself. I would say I actually came here thinking they were going to talk about the Green Climate Fund, which already scares me, the way they do things. But you painted a picture of one body, one organization, one fund, just controlling everything. Now, I represent the indigenous people in the province of Acomayo in Peru. The president of my organization is Inca. We've been looking for funding for a long time for a project. However, what you describe is something indigenous people won't accept, because even with sustainable tourism, which has been abandoned in this document, the latest document, indigenous people would like to be in control of their environment and their communities. So I never heard of your fund, and I've been with the United Nations since '91. So I'm a little concerned of what you talked about today. Thank you.
Okay, well, the fund was created in 2015, this fund.
Oh,
The
this
previous fund, the Millennium Development Goals Fund,
I'm
where...
not talking about I'm sorry, I'm not talking about Millennium Development Goal. I was talking about the Green Climate Fund.
Yeah, but I mean, what I'm trying to explain is that I'm not working in the Green Climate Fund, so I'm not going to say anything about that. But what can I say is that the SDG Fund now is working in a specific program in Honduras with indigenous women, trying to promote tourism there. And of course, the communities are the responsible for the implementation of the program, and the communities are the responsible of the commercialization of these small businesses, especially created by women and for women, according with the indigenous traditions and indigenous rules. But apart of that, what I wanted to say is that with the Millennium Development Goals, I remember I was working there, and I remember that we work very close, especially in Colombia, with one of the biggest organizations of indigenous people. And I remember that I participated in the launch of the reading of the MDGs from the point of view of the indigenous population, which is a different thing, but we finance the report, and we finance some activities in order to distribute that, and also we participate in the Indigenous Forum here in New York, trying to share the views of the indigenous people. I mean, here in New York, that sometimes the views are a little bit different, as you know. So I'm not aware about the Green Fund because, I mean, I'm not working with them. And you are right. Now with the SDG Fund, we don't have a specific program only for that, but we have some programs, as I mentioned, like the one in Honduras, in the Ruta Lenca, where we are promoting the business for indigenous women.
Please, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Hi. My name is Sharon Nelson. I'm president of the Women's Political Caucus of New York City. I'm a guest of these lovely ladies around me. Director Duran, it was very impressive and comprehensive, the presentation that you gave. I'd like to suggest that if you don't already have it, that perhaps a marketing entity could be there for dissecting and or putting different timelines and pieces together to coordinate the a lot of material that you gave us today in terms of the policy implementation, the different programming, the matching funds that are needed, because it's very hard sometimes for people to digest all of this activity, and I'd like to offer to be of assistance if that's something of interest.
It's noted. Thank you so much.
Anyone else?
My name is Christine Harland. I'm the wife of a man who worked for UNDP for about 46 years. And I'm very interested in what you had to say today, and I was very impressed because what went on in 1962 is very different from what your goals for 2015, and I do congratulate you on your presentation. I would also have, just as I'd like to know, as a resident representative advocate, how do you choose this resident representative advocate? It used to be that UNDP had resident representatives. Would that be the case still?
Okay, one thing that I didn't explain is that the SDG Fund is under the umbrella of UNDP as a chair of the UN Development Group. We don't belong to UNDP because we are an interagency mechanism. So, but for instance, in the case of the ROCAs, because, you know, the approach of the fund is try, as I mentioned, try to to add, try to put together synergies, try to work together. For instance, in the case of the Rocas, the fund didn't appoint them as goodwill ambassadors. We invite UNDP to invite them as goodwill ambassadors, just trying to avoid any kind of competency among the agencies, which sometimes is a bit complicated. But I think that, with the SDGs, UNDP has a wonderful list of representatives, also, UNICEF, also UN Women, also. But, I think that with the special champions or goodwill ambassadors, it happened exactly the same that when you are talking about companies or you are talking about governments. It depends of each person. There are some people that are already appointed because I don't know what they think about the UN, but they received the appointment. And in other cases, you have people that are really committed. What we would like to have is leaders in the social sector that are really committed people. That's the reason, because in the case of the architects, we support the work of this Chilean architect because he's working only in social housing. In the case of the Roca brothers, even if they have the best restaurant in the world, at least up to the last year, because now is the 11 Madison is the name, of the American one that got the award this year. But they have, probably one of the most expensive restaurants in the world. But at the same time, they have a very interesting sustainability program there, where not only for the recycling, sorry, I always confuse this word. But anyway, recycling the crystal and the bottles and everything, but also to integrate the SDGs in the core business of the company, how they use the water, how they save the water in the work that they are doing. So we are trying just to find people not only ready to help us in the implementation, but also really committed to spread the word and to talk about sustainability in the most committed way.
Last question. Faika, please, go ahead.
I wanted to ask you, how do you approach local businesses in different countries? Is there a criteria? Do you approach them or do they approach you? How does that work?
So, I think that the members of the private sector advisory group are really real champions, in the sense that, for instance, as I mentioned last year, when we organized these workshops with companies from different regions, every member of the private sector advisory group organized one of these workshops. For instance, in the case of Nigeria, they invited like 60 companies. In the case of the US, they invited like 100 companies. So it's very easy then to talk at the local level with these companies. Plus, we usually, as I mentioned, work with the office of the resident coordinator that in the field really is the responsible also to talk with local businesses in order to engage them. So, we are working like at the two levels. At the global level with our members of the advisory group and at the local level with the RC, with the resident coordinator office.
If there is no more questions, we want to thank Paloma again for her time for this conference. We will give her a gift as a small appreciation. And we also would like to we also want to thank the Permanent Mission of Peru for co-hosting this event. Thank you all ladies for being here with us. I would like the board to come here to make the official picture, and I wish you all a good afternoon. Thank you so much.